Jack Cranley with Cascadia Premium Wines and Backroads Wine Club. I'm joined today by my favorite mayor of Portland, Kyle MacLachlan. How are you today?
I'm good, Jack. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So, I learned about your Washington winery a few years ago, and I've been following it a little bit, and I'm really excited to share it with my club members. Tell me a little bit about Pursued by Bear from your perspective. Where the idea came from, where the name came from, and what your philosophy is with it.
Okay, great. So first, I guess I should start out by saying I'm a Northwest native. I grew up on the east side, Eastern Washington, a little town called Yakima. When I was growing up, of course, there wasn't much wine to speak of, particularly on the east side, apart from the big makers over on the other side, Chateau Saint Michel, of course, and Columbia Crest. So my wine journey started a little bit later in life, and it was helped along by mentors that I met in Napa and other places. But I didn't really get tuned into what was happening in Washington State until I guess it was probably the late 90s, I guess. My sister-in-law actually said, you should try some of these wines. There's this brand called Leonetti that's not so bad. And I tried it and I was like, wow, this is really impressive. And I had been sort of toying with the idea of getting into the wine business a little bit, thinking specifically of Napa. Just turned out to be incredibly cost prohibitive. So it really brought my focus back to Washington, but it wasn't until I met Eric Dunham at Dunham Cellars, and we got to know each other a little bit. I wanted one of his wines to serve at my wedding reception in 2002, and we got to become friends. Yeah, it was the Syrah that he made, because he makes with the Syrah. And I said, we got to know each other, and I said, hey, would you ever partner with me on a wine adventure, really? And he said, sure. He said, what do you like to drink? I said, Cabernet. He said, well, let's make Cabernet. I said, that sounds good to me. So, but I guess the point is a really casual start for me. Know nothing about the wine business. I mean, I know I like to drink wine, but nothing about the business. And so I really cut my teeth with the Dunham family, with Eric and Mike. And we had a partnership up until a few years ago when I dissolved the partnership. Mike and Eric are both gone. I dissolved the partnership and took over control of the brand Pursued by Bear. And so now it's my own baby. My winemaker is Dan Wampler, who he does all custom work for me, but he works at a Beha. I'm sure you're familiar with the Beha winery.
I am, and I've actually featured that wine in my club before too.
Oh, great wine. He does a wonderful job. And his wife, Amy, is an extraordinary winemaker as well. So they got two for the price of one there at Beha, two great winemakers. Yeah. Dan's been making my wine since 2006, 2007, roughly in there. He's been involved with it. So we have a long history together. I started in 2005. Pursued by Bear comes from a Shakespearean stage direction, actually, in Winter's Tale, Act 3, Scene 3 of the Winter's Tale. Shakespeare wrote, "Exit pursued by a bear." And I've been tickled by that stage direction. It's maybe his most famous. It's certainly his most unusual and unexpected. And I thought, well, that would be a perfect name for a bear. Kind of harkens back to my day job as an actor, of course, but also, speaks to something a little bit unusual, a little bit unexpected, which I guess is the idea of me making wine. Sure.
Yeah. Well, and so what would you say you've learned over the years with owning a wine label, and what have been some of the valuable adventures that have gone along with that?
Jack, it's all an adventure. It's a complete adventure.
Yeah.
As I said, when I came in, I knew nothing. And, I'm an actor by trade, not a business person. So I really had to learn everything. But, along the way, I've been fortunate enough to have really, really good mentors, and that started, I mentioned some of the people in Napa. Ann Colgan is a very good friend of mine. And she, of course, started in 92 with Colgan Cellars. And she told me her story, which inspired me. She was custom crushing at the time. She'd hired Helen Turley as her winemaker. And I said, well, okay, that sounds kind of like what I'm doing. I'm custom crushing at Dunham. I've got my winemaker that I've hired. And then it just came down to like learning about Washington State and, where the best fruit is from, why it's good. Finding my barrels that I wanted to use, and that that didn't take too much time, but all these little steps along the way. And I had terrific mentors, starting in Napa, and then with Eric Dunham and Mike Dunham, working in Washington State, and on to Dan Wampler. So I've surrounded myself by happy coincidence or accident, I don't know, with people that really know what they're doing. And I guess one thing I have learned, I'm smart enough to listen to somebody else. So I know that I don't know. So the idea is hire people who do know, and that's
Yeah,
been kind of the
that's really one of the primary things of getting better with wine in general. It's just acknowledging what you don't know.
a lot.
um, how much are you personally involved with the winemaking process? Are you there for blending trials and that kind of thing?
Yeah, we do all the blending together. I'm very involved in where we source from. I don't have any estate fruit, which is not that uncommon in Washington. We source from a number of different vineyards that over the years, since 2005, I've gradually sort of pulled the ones that I think make the most sense, that I'm the most excited about to me. De Brule, of course, being one. Hugh Shields vineyard there up above Prosser is a vineyard that's been consistently great and delivers just wonderful low yields, really, really intense flavors and aromas. And I'm a big fan of what he does. And the like, Dionysus is another source that I go to. So I'm pretty tapped into all of these locations with the different growers. A lot of that is helped by Dan Wampfler, who's been, he has relationships with all of these guys, and so it's been really that's been incredibly helpful. But I'm there, 4 or 5 times a year. In fact, going back to the original reason for Pursued by Bear, one of the reasons was to bring myself back to my hometown. And at the time, my dad was still alive, and I wanted to spend more time with him. So I said, hey, this is something we could do together. We can enjoy this. He can be part of the process. And it got me home more frequently to see him, which I was grateful for.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, good.
As far as the wines themselves, I had Scott from Galaxy bring over what's available from them right now, and it's all 16s.
Yes.
So I was hoping maybe you could say a few words about the 16 vintage in general. Like, what was your experience with that growing year and the wines that resulted?
It was a big deal for me because, again, I mentioned that was the year that I made the formal separation from Dunham, all amicable and everything. So suddenly I was kind of a little bit more on my own. And with that came an enthusiasm, I'm afraid, for acquiring grapes that sort of got me in trouble. In fact, let's just say my eyes were bigger than my stomach. And so I was sourcing from a lot of different locations that I was interested in that I hadn't had the opportunity to source from before. That, along with the fact that the 2016 vintage was a big year. There was a lot of production, even though there was a lot of, we drop a lot of fruit, it still came in heavy. So needless to say, I had more juice than I knew what to do with. We were actually trying to find containers to bring it.
Right.
I almost say we were fermenting in a bathtub. No, it wasn't quite that extreme, but I mean, we were looking for anything, any open vessel would work. But
the fruit was all good.
And the fruit was, it was an extraordinary year. So
Yeah.
Starting with that, it was a great year. I know I'm in 2016, and we're right near the end of the 2016 Cabernet, just releasing the 2017 Cabernet. But the 2016 is just drinking so beautifully. I do things slightly differently. We barrel age. It's all new oak. It's all Terranceau. It's all extremely tight grain, very thick stave barrels that we use. And I barrel age from, anywhere between 26, 28, sometimes 30 months.
Oh, so it's pretty extended élevage.
Very extended. And this is why we're at 16, just now moving to 2017. So we're maybe a step behind, but I do that intentionally because I find that when the wine is in the barrel for that length of time, it just gains just beautiful presence and then soften. I know people get scared about having wine in oak for that length of time, but these barrels are so spectacular that the oak is given and then it stops.
Yeah.
And so they're basically now it's just aging in these little tiny casks is what I like to say. So we found that it works, and that's just through experimentation, just sort of pushing the aging a little bit longer and a little bit longer. I think there's another winery, I think Corliss in Walla Walla also does extended barrel aging as well. And it really works with the fruit from Washington.
Yeah, that's another label that we wound up featuring in the club a couple years ago. Yeah, so I'm just hopping my way through all the favorites in Washington.
Good.
I had a chance to sip through the whole lineup before we signed on together, and I was really taken aback at reading the winemaking notes and seeing 2-3 years sometimes in barrel, but just still having quite a bit of restraint on the nose. It's not overpowered. The fruit is still very pure. I would consider this a relatively restrained wine. So yeah.
That was part of the discovery. You just don't know when you start. For instance, and the blends have changed. I mean, when I started Pursued by Bear in 2005, a flagship wine, it was a Cab Merlot Syrah blend. Now, granted, the Syrah wasn't a huge component, 6 or 7%, but it was definitely present. And that fluctuated over the years until like we got into the 2010 or 2011, I can't remember exactly, or maybe it was 12, when I decided to move away from that particular blend and pursue a more traditional Bordeaux style. So we gradually phased the Syrah out as and part of that was also learning about my vineyards, so I'm realizing these vineyards are standout vineyards, and I really didn't want the Syrah element to sort of interfere with that Cab Merlot classic duo. So that was another reason for it. I also had the Baby Bear as 100% Syrah, which we'll get to. I could use. So it was intentional to move this more into a more Bordeaux style, and with that kind of restrained elegance that you talk about. You didn't say elegance, I did, but I find it to be.
I agree, though.
I find it to be elegant, and I too. It took me a few vintages to really trust that these barrels were not going to overpower the juice and from what I had, but lend another kind of just refinement and an extra dimension, really.
Extra layer of complexity.
And I've just gone with it. Yeah.
Switching a little bit to more current events. As you know, the whole West Coast is being affected by a spate of unprecedented wildfires. I've been getting a lot of questions from my customers about, how that's going to affect vineyards and the wines from 2020. What are you hearing as far as effects, especially up in Washington this year?
I spoke to Dan, my winemaker, just yesterday, and we talked about it. And he's actually pretty optimistic about the harvest this year. Washington is most of the growing areas where the grapes are on sort of sage lands. So there's fires certainly do come through, but they're quick. They burn hot and they burn fast, and there's not a lot of smoke. I mean, and the vineyards are pretty much protected. Things can happen, but they're protected by fire breaks. So he's saying, we're knock on wood, the smoke element, which is really the concern, is not as big a concern as in some other areas where long sustained burns, huge amounts of smoke that'll get in the vineyard, and that will definitely have an impact if it stays there long enough. So he's feeling pretty good for Washington. I mean, this is what we're talking about mostly with my stuff and his stuff. I'm sure there are other growers where that is not the case. But in our situation, we're feeling cautiously optimistic.
It's going to be site to site.
I believe so.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly good news on your front, at least. And then as far as looking into the future, what is your current production level now, and where do you see the label going? Do you plan on building the production at all?
I do. 2015 was a bit of a growth year for us. The Bear Cub, which is in the center there, I can see him, came to be partially by accident. I was talking earlier about 2016 and what a big vintages it was and how much juice we had, and I had to do something with it. And I had been toying with the idea of a tasting room in Walla Walla, which I've started and kind of came to a screeching halt with COVID and everything. So we're hoping, fingers crossed, that we'll have something available for customers in the spring of this coming year of 2021. But the Bear Cub came about because I had all this wonderful juice and I didn't know what to do with it. I kind of reached my quota on what I thought was my quota on Pursued by Bear of 500 cases, roughly. I had the capability of making 1,500 cases of Pursued by Bear. And I just said, that's just too much too soon. So I thought, you know what, let's make more of an entry-level wine. So this wine, while it's still made in the same style as Pursued, some different vineyards, maybe not quite at the height of what I use in Pursued by Bear, but still considered really, really strong vineyards in Washington, went into Bear Cub. It's the same new French oak. It's the same Taranto barrels. It's a wine that over-delivers for the price, but it gets me into like that sort of a lower price point range. It's still not inexpensive. It's $35 retail, but it's certainly lower than the $70 for the Pursued by Bear. And it also allowed me the chance to go back to the original blend. So I put a little bit of Syrah in the Bear Cub, which makes it just more approachable. It's easy to drink. It's fun. It's got great flavors. and it of itself, I'm excited to see kind of where it goes, because we're going to age that out a little bit and see what happens. This is the first vintage, 2016, so
Oh, fun.
it's still new.
Yeah, when I was tasting through, I was it was fun because the Bear Cub was definitely much more friendly, but just a more gregarious wine. It's half the price, but it's certainly not half the interestingness level, you know. Um, but the Pursued by Bear, I think it does warrant the elevated price tag because it has this incredible structure that I think this wine is going to age really well.
Yeah.
And you know, what are your thoughts on how long this could lay down in the cellar?
You know, I pulled out a 2005 the other day, and granted, it's a different blend and a different process, but it was still available and tasting gorgeous. You're right; these are made to age. We build them so that they can spend some time in the bottle, and they're also ready to go. You know, today. I mean, I think they're helped by decanting, and they're helped by setting it out for a few hours. I find it to be exciting just to drink them the next day. You know, sometimes you don't get quite through a bottle, or maybe you've had two and you have a little extra.
Right.
Bottle. But I find that additional amount of time in the air really just it just takes the wine to another place altogether. So so they're made. You know, there's enough fruit there. There's enough structure there. I think that, and they're kind of an equal balance. That we're able to, lay them down for a while.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And then when I got to the Syrah, boy, is that a really interesting wine. You know, sometimes we talk about with Washington Syrah, there's this kind of funkiness that you get. Like some people call it bacon fat, or some people just call it funky or smoky meat or whatever. But this wine has it in spades. And it was really a joy to drink. But what about the aging capability of the Syrah?
Similar, I think. I've gone back, I've got some '08, which was the first year that I made it, the year my son was born. The name actually came about because both that wine and my son were born on the same year, 2008.
Oh,
so,
nice.
It's his wine. So that's Baby Bear. He's the little cub that's on there, and I'm a big bear. He's about to jump on me, or he's crawling off me, whatever's happened. So we've been wrestling together. So. But thank you. It's the kind of Syrah that I like to drink. Again, Washington makes extraordinary Syrah. We source this from two vineyards in different parts of the state, the Lewis Vineyard and Finney. We age it in 600-liter barrels, so a little more than twice the size of the traditional Bordeaux barrel. It's all new again. They're just beautiful big barrels. We keep one sur lise, so the sediment remains, and we just basically turn the barrel to keep that. It just improves the mouthfeel, and so chocolate tones that come through. I think they're just gorgeous.
I noticed the velvety mouthfeel. I imagine it has a little to do with that.
It does.
Yeah.
And so it's built with some purpose. It's roughly 50-50, sometimes 60-40, depending on the yield from these vineyards. And we just, that we didn't do a lot of difference from the very beginning. When we started with Eric and I came up with this idea of using the larger format barrels, partly to distinguish itself from the Dunham Syrah, because they sourced from similar vineyards. And I said I wanted something just to make a difference. And the Terenceau barrels and the large format really have had an impact on that. And it's just the Syrah I drink. So there's a lot of fruit there. There's a lot of lusciousness. It's a great mouthfeel. People from the Northwest know their Syrahs, and they're not scared of them. People in the rest of the country, it takes a little bit of a push to get them to open a bottle of Syrah. Once they do, they're happy they have.
Yeah. One last thing I wanted to ask you about is I remember a few years back you were the keynote speaker at the International Pinot Noir celebration in McMinnville.
Yes.
And of course the Willamette Valley is my home team.
Yeah.
So I've always been wondering if you ever considered maybe working with Pinot Noir ever.
I would love to. It's a dream. It's a kind of a future dream, being so focused on Walla Walla and Washington and the tasting room, and even eventually possibly owning a vineyard there, a vineyard site. That's sort of in the future. But two things that I would love to do. One, there's the Pinots that I love come from Oregon. I would love to get involved in that. It's a much the journey seems very interesting to me, and I don't know that much about it, but I would love to jump into it. And the other thing I'd like to do is really source a really nice white there, find a nice Chardonnay, a cooler climate Chardonnay, make something more in the tradition of like a white Burgundy. I mean, we all love white Burgundy. No one's going to be able to make a white Burgundy like they do it in France, but but our version, the Northwest version, what that would be. And I would love to play with that a little bit. And I feel like sourcing it from that cooler climate would be really the way to go. I haven't even started really thinking about it. I haven't reached out yet, but it's in my mind, just spinning around.
Back there somewhere, ruminating. Yeah. Well, I think that would be really fun.
Yeah, it would be.
Well, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk with you about today. I really appreciate you taking some time. I'm really excited to share these wines with my members, and I'll certainly get back to you with any feedback that they might have.
I would love that. I listen really intently to any tasting notes and people as they approach it and what they feel and what it reminds them of, or and we take that I take it very seriously, and we plug that into the process. You know what I mean? So yeah, any feedback you get, I would love to hear.
I imagine that's got to be one of the more fulfilling parts of owning your own label.
It is. It's nice to share it and to talk about Washington and the Northwest. My travels take me all over the world, and so I feel like I'm a little bit of an ambassador, kind of a crusader for Northwest wines, which I enjoy. I enjoy that responsibility.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, good. Yeah. We need to get the word out. These are great wines. These are high quality wines for not a lot of money. When you compare with some of the other areas in the world, particularly California. So
great.
People need to know about them.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much. We'll catch you later.
Thanks, Jack. Pleasure talking to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take
care.
Bye-bye.